Hi, I'm Eric.
And I am Dick. We are the Annuity Guys.
Dick, today we're going to talk about securities versus annuities. Are you ready?
I'm ready. But you know what? I don't really think there's a war between annuities and securities.
Oh, don't put the insurance companies and the mutual fund companies.
Well, if you go out in the media or you look at the internet, I mean, it does appear that way. But when you really look and analyze what annuities do and what securities do, they do completely separate things for separate reasons.
Right.
that folks would choose, one over the other for that purpose or balance them. Now, let's just talk about the individual that we run into. We run into really probably several types, but at least three. At least three. The first one I would say is the person that's very risk averse. They wouldn't want their money invested in the stock market.
And we've seen that because of 2008 is still recent in many folks' memories. Mm-hmm. Nobody likes the idea of losing a large chunk of their portfolio. Those people have become very risk averse, especially those nearing retirement who say, I've saved this amount, I'm ready to retire.
Right.
I can't afford for that to happen to me.
Well, and then you got the folks that basically had their money in the market through the 80s, and their money just went straight up. And had they not have had their money in the market, they just kind of rode it out, and it grew into a pretty large amount of money. So there, some folks are just the opposite. You couldn't give them an annuity. They don't want anything to do with an annuity.
And that's people that know that
they're risk oriented.
The time basically in the market will eventually correct and bring everything back is what we've kind of seen historically. Yeah. But you have to have the time and the patience and be willing to ride out the storm, so to speak.
And the third type of person that I'm sure there's more folks, but the third type of person that you and I run into all the time is the person that's kind of methodically put their money in a 401k or their IRA. It's probably been invested mostly in the market. They've amassed some savings. They know that there's something they need to do for retirement to balance that, to get into a more safe position possibly. And so they read all of these conflicting articles, and that's where I think we really need to talk about annuities versus securities and how you can balance that.
And that's, I think, the key aspect, balancing it. We always talk about the literature out there that says as you get closer to retirement, you need to get more conservative. And I think that has to do more with what we talk about, the sequence of returns risk that's available.
Explain that a little bit, sequence of returns.
Well, I call it reverse. The best way you can think of it is reverse dollar cost averaging.
Right.
Because when you're putting dollars into a portfolio and you're buying in more often when the market's low, and so you're getting the benefit as the market goes off, you bought in low and you're hopefully going to sell high.
Right, you average it.
If you're then on the reverse side, now all of a sudden you're retired, you need these dollars to live off of. What happens when the market corrects and you're still taking out that same amount of dollars? Well, what happens is you're taking out more proportionally than you would if the market was on a nice, smooth kind of sail.
So you're running yourself out of money very quickly.
You're taking out a larger chunk of your assets because you're being impacted when the market's down. And so it has a negative aspect that if the market's down when you first start retirement, especially in those first 5 years, usually typically after you retire, that's the part where you're most susceptible to running your portfolio dry if you're taking too much out during that time period.
Isn't this an area that we talk about quite frequently where annuities can really smooth that out?
Well, and we're big proponents of a fixed type of annuity. So, and the reason is you don't let the market take your dollars. You can still withdraw them. You're taking them out as either from an income rider or just taking withdrawals from a fixed or a fixed indexed annuity. The good thing is, we talk about zero being your hero. If the market's down, the worst that's going to happen to your portfolio is you'll get a zero. Now, you're still taking the withdrawal. You're still taking your money out. But you're not letting the market take any additional dollars out and really hamper the downside.
Right. And folks, what we're really talking about here is the fixed indexed annuity. It's been around for 20 years, since 1995. And the whole idea of this is not that you're going to compete with the stock market, but that you actually have a way to earn more interest than what the banks pay and what basic fixed annuities pay. And you keep a degree of safety in your portfolio. And a good example of a way to use fixed annuities properly would be to potentially maybe replace your bond portion of your portfolio with annuities as one example.
And we've been talking about this for a couple of years because
Yes.
of a study that Wade Pfau had done where he took, and he was actually using SPIAs in his study for income to produce basically future income guarantees and replacing part of the bond portion of the portfolio. And what he discovered is that your chance of running out of money was significantly
Yes.
decreased by having that continuity from the income portion being
Yes.
provided by the SPIA. So again, it's adding that element of safety
Right.
that you don't have to worry about the fluctuations in that portion. Now, I think the same portion can be true of using a fixed or a fixed indexed annuity in that portion, where you're again smoothing out the bumps during that period of time when you're taking income.
Exactly. And we should also mention that when we talk about annuities versus securities, we're primarily talking about stocks and bonds as securities.
Right.
And we also have to mention that some annuities are securities. Variable annuities.
Variable annuities are
Yes.
considered securities.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we talk about annuities versus securities, folks, we're really referring more to the fixed index annuity, the fixed annuity type, and kind of letting the variable annuity stand off to the side as a security and not really looking at that so much as, the comparison.
Right. So ultimately, I think what we get back to is, again, like we started with, it's the growth potential versus on the security side typically versus the safety side on the annuity side. What's nice now with some of these fixed indexed annuities is the growth potential really does get you some of that participation. You're not invested in the market,
Right.
but you get that participation of a part of that increase if the markets do in fact go up.
Right. Well, and folks, if you are the type of person that really is risk averse and you really want none of your money in the market, then you're going to be really left with choices like banks and annuities, this type of thing. And for those of you that know that you really want nothing to do with annuities or bank instruments, if at all possible, because you want to.
You've probably turned this video off a long time ago.
Then you know that the stock market is for you and you're willing to ride those ups and downs
Right.
and that type of thing. But for those of you that are kind of in that middle ground, that are really thinking in terms of how do I balance my portfolio? One thing that we talk about a lot, Eric, is a foundational portion in the portfolio, something that really covers your basic living expenses.
Right. Yeah, it's about safeguarding a certain amount of dollars, whether we always talk about Social Security, pensions, and typically annuities. Those are the foundational pieces because they can provide some sort of guarantee, typically on the income side and retirement. And I think this is really where, you can look at what I call asset dedication, where you're using specific dollars coming from, like we said, those fixed income portions, and dedicating them to taking care of a certain amount of your portfolio, or your income need rather, from your portfolio. And once you've got the foundation covered, hey, then you can take all the risk you want because your basic necessities are covered.
Right. So when it really comes down, Eric, to annuities versus securities, is there really this serious contest of good versus evil?
No, I don't think it's Luke. Luke. I am your father. Is not. Darth Vader's not coming in. It's not good versus evil. I think it's more of what fits your particular risk classification and what's going to work best in your situation from a balance perspective.
Exactly, balancing the two.